and we can start with today. Right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Today's session is the fourth session of the bolstering the adoption of the 4Ps culture framework within organizations, and it will focus on problem solving. And once again, we are privileged and honored to have Mark Jose to be facilitating today's session, which takes place as part of the shared learning program activities of the various cluster programs that we represent, and they are outlined there at the bottom of the slide, namely the Durban Automotive Cluster, the East Cape Automotive Industry Forum, the Durban Automotive Cluster, the eThekwini Furniture Cluster, the Cape Clothing and Textiles Cluster, the KwaZulu-Natal Clothing and Textiles Cluster, and last, the South African Automotive Benchmarking Club. My name is Sean Ellis, and I'll be doing the introduction of today's session, and obviously then handing over to Mark to facilitate the session. Just in terms of going through some of the upfront admin stuff, it's important to just state that BMA takes no responsibility for any decisions taken as a result of these events, or any inaccuracies which may be contained within these events. But ultimately, it's always our intention to ensure that maximum benefit is derived from these events for our participating firms. It's also important to note that we always look to adhere to the competition law that is in place in South Africa. And obviously in that regard, it's important to state that the participants in the session acknowledge that they will not undertake any activities which contravene the competition law that is currently in place. These sessions would not be possible without the participation of our various funders, and the clusters that we represent operate as public-private partnerships between industry as well as the public sector. In that regard, we obviously need to thank our industry representatives, and those will be the firms that are members of the various clusters that I mentioned earlier, and a number of you are participating in today's sessions. Obviously, the support of industry is critically important to the continual existence of the cluster programs, and in that regard, it's also critically important that we highlight the public sector, the public entities that fund our programs and are significant funders of our programs. In that regard, a special mention to the eThekwini municipality, the province of the Eastern Cape, as well as Invest Cape Town and the city of Cape Town in the Western Cape. All right, in terms of today's session, it's going to focus on unpacking the fourth P of the 4Ps cultural framework, which is namely problem solving. And as I mentioned, Mark Jose will be facilitating today's session, as has been the case for the previous three sessions that have focused on the 4Ps culture. At the end of the session, as normal, we will have a Q&A discussion session. In that regard, please feel free to submit any questions or comments in the chat during the session, and we will definitely look at coming back to those at the end of the session. You'll also be given the opportunity to raise your virtual hand to ask questions of Mark directly in relation to not only today's session, but in relation to some of the other areas covered over the first three sessions that have been held. You will see that I do include this picture of a light bulb through my slides. That is intended to encourage each of you to really look for new ideas, ways of thinking to emerge from the session. So, we encourage you to try and find at least one new idea, hopefully more from the session. So I would argue the onus is on each of you to really go and find and extract those benefits from the sessions that we facilitate. We've had a busy year. I'm not going to go through this in detail. The slides will be sent out, but we've had a busy year in terms of our events, and our various events are highlighted in these slides over here. Obviously, we are currently concluding the series of events with Mark Jose, which entailed 4 sessions being held. And I just want to mention that on the 12th of September, we have got an in-person event taking place at the Toyota Vessels Institute of Manufacturing Studies in KwaZulu-Natal in Gillett on mastering the art of sustainability disclosures or sustainability reporting. And that, like I said, is an in-person event. So there will be no virtual element, but if you are in KZN, you obviously are encouraged to participate. And if you are going to be in the region over that period, you're also definitely encouraged to participate. And we have posted the registration in the chat. We will also be having events in October on reducing lost time, and in November on Project Present, which will focus on attendance management and reducing your absenteeism, but those details will be sent out in due course. Yeah, and then we also have a WhatsApp group, which enables us to engage with our firms. All right, I think I've already introduced Mike over the previous 3 sessions, so I'm going to hand over to Mike so we can maximize the amount of time that we have with him for today's session. So with that, Mike, I'm going to stop sharing my slides and hand over to you to take it away in terms of the final session. Perfect. I can see your slides perfectly, Mike. Please go ahead.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Sean. And again, thank you all for joining all 4 sessions. And I want to start where Sean had kind of stopped on. That's on the light bulb and your ideas. So, I think we talked about the first session, the culture being behaviors. All right. So I just had a 3-day session last week with a group, so it's fresh. And every time I have a group, I challenge them to leave with a new behavior. Both individually and organizationally, right? So you have an individual behavior that you can do when you interact with people. And then organizationally, I want you to think about ways that you can impact a system. Remember, we talked about the first session as well. Systems are what influences behaviors, and behaviors are what influences your business results. So the systems we gave were examples of, hiring system, an onboarding system, daily management system we'll talk about today, suggestion system. So those are systems that you can all influence behaviors of people in your team, in your organization. So I don't let people leave the, in-person trainings without telling the whole group what they're going to change their behavior and what system they're going to go work on. So we don't have time for that today. But I do want to challenge you with that. By the end of the hour, you all have a behavior that you want to implement, that you want to change, and a system that you want to go after to influence other people's behavior. All right. So the last session, Sean said, is the problem solving, plan, do, check, act. I call it the core of the 4 Ps because it's kind of the intention. Toyota Production System, TPS, has been talked about and written about as a problem-solving system, and that's exactly what it is. I think I mentioned Toyota's definition of TPS is a culture of highly engaged people who are identifying and solving problems, right, to drive performance improvement. So again, that's the behaviors. We want everybody identifying and solving problems in order to drive performance improvement. We want leaders to be coaching and teaching people to identify and solve problems. Again, the Japanese taught us problem identification was one of the biggest barriers or challenges. And once the problem's identified, then we can solve it. No problem ID, no problem solving. And as we talked about in the second P, the processes, the tools, the 5S, the value stream mapping, the standard work, the visualization of scoreboards that are all meant to identify problems or opportunities for improvement. So now we can solve them. And again, we talked about in the people one, now we have people who are willing and able to identify and solve them. And someone had written a comment that Sean had sent too, that, even back to the purpose triangle, like we want people who are understanding the purpose, where they fit into the big picture of that. Remember, we talked about mutual long-term prosperity, where they're motivated to identify and solve problems. So this is where they all those P's come together in this one. Again, with those systems, that is it resulting in people identifying and solving problems? If it's not, then you have problem solving to do. So let's proceed. So again, we mentioned in part of the True North that we want everybody solving problems and at all levels. So again, we talk about different levels of problem solving as far as types of problem solving, and then levels of the organization. So it gets confusing sometimes. So we're talking about levels as far as work team, operators, leads. We're talking about supervisors, and then managers, and then executives. So that's the levels of the organization. Levels of the problem solving are what we call those standard work or Kaizen with the operators, what we call daily problem solving, first level problem solving, basic problem solving, real-time problem solving. I've heard it called lots of things. Our challenge is to get it happening, because I've heard it called many things, but I haven't seen it in many organizations. Then we have this, the supervisors kind of piggyback off that daily management problem solving, and then they'll also take some of the management directed problem solving. Then we've got leaders, again, managers with system problem solving, and then executives with strategic problem solving, that Hoshin Connery annual objectives. So again, I had the good fortune to grow up at Toyota as a supervisor and a manager and an executive. So I've had firsthand experience in doing all those problem solvings, being coached, in other words, in doing those, and then coaching others in doing all those. And there's a lot of confusion in organizations on blurring those problem solving. And even so, anyway, we'll talk about like A3 problem solving. That's more the middle system problem solving. But I'll run an organization like that's the only one they're looking at, and not doing the operator one. And of course, the operators are the most of people in our organization. That operators and leads at Toyota in Kentucky, we had 8,000 people, 6,500 were the operators and leads. But other organizations, their systems are looking at, a handful of managers and engineers for problem solving instead of the 6,500. Or I should say, in addition, right? It's like we said, all. So I hope you're getting that, again, that true north that we want all people problem solving. This size I like a little bit. It's a little bit simpler. Again, we've got that basic PDCA at the operator. We've got the A3 or project or system problem solving, cross-functional problem solving at that manager, engineer, CI level. And then we've got the Hoshin Connery strategic deployment, business planning, strategic problem solving, again, at the executive level. Now, back on the Shingo model, we talked about 80-20. That's what I was also taught by the Japanese. So in other words, operators leads 80% in the daily basic, but that doesn't mean they don't understand or do A3s. So we would have operators do A3s for quality circles, for example. So it's 80%. So most of the time they're going to be doing daily, but they'll also understand A3s, and then they'll link to the Hoshin with those A3s. And as an executive, I was taught, again, like 80% I'm doing strategic long-term problem solving, but obviously I'm linking in, I'm coaching the A3s, and then I'm going to the Gemba on occasion to even drill down on a basic problem solving to check to see, again, what the capability of the operators and team leaders are in doing basic problem solving. So that's that 20% of the time. So I hope that's making sense, because again, I see a lot of confusion in that. So it's all three of them happening is what we want in our ideal culture. Now, 3 stages of problem solving is a different thing. So remember our definition of a problem. And I hope you remember that from our way back. I forget what month that was. Sean had flashed there on our initial true north. We talked about problem is it needs 3 things: a standard, a current, and a gap. So that's that goal that you have, and then you've got the line graph and a gap. So then we reach that, then we close that gap. So remember that problem identification: 3 things: a target or standard, a current situation that's different, and then that subsequent gap. And then we work to find root cause in order to close that gap. Once we close that gap, what do we do? Now, in Kentucky, we wanted to then, go on to the next problem. And the Japanese wanted to make sure we maintained. So that's why I put this slide in here. Because a lot of times, I know personally, I jumped ahead. And they wanted to make sure that I maintained that improvement or that problem solving. And again, that gets into systems. So did I link it to standard work? So I just had my learning, again, my root cause. Then did I put it into my new standard work? So that's not tribal knowledge, but that it's literally, you know, what's the word I was looking for? My goodness, we documented it. So we've standardized it. So we've captured it. Again, it sounds simple, but I'm in organizations all the time, and I'm always checking. And rarely do I see that problem solving, that's happening. Does it then get linked to the standard work? And that's a system problem. And so I think we probably talked about it on the process thing, like who is developing your standard work? And if it's engineers and quality or whatever, then most likely then it's not going to get updated. So we talked about the work instructions and the engineering instruction. That's an important set of documents that we want to keep. But the standard work was a different set of documents for the operators and the leads and the supervisors to use in order to, again, to manage this improvement and to get documented and then to train the new part of it. So those are two systems. I think I remember talking, the Japanese told us that those two systems accounted for 80% of our problems. Standard work and training. So that's why they emphasize that middle thing there, because if we don't capture it and we don't document it, and then we don't have it into the new training for the new people coming in next week, next month, then it's tribal knowledge. We didn't leverage the learning. We lost it. So that's why that slide is in here. That was my learning on that maintaining. So once we do that, then we can do the Kaizen and the improvement. But again, most people are floundering, so to speak, in that back and forth from the problem. They put in a short-term thing, or maybe even a good thing, but like I said, then does it get documented? Then the problem comes back, so they're forever in this loop. So you got to get the problem solved and you got to get it maintained. Then you can go on to your next cycle of improvement. Hope that makes sense. Again, simple but not easy. But think about that standard work and that training. All right. Then Toyota, I put this in here for the Toyota 8-step problem solving. Now I want to make sure we're on the same page with our definition of problem solving. We gave you a definition of problem. That's standard, current, and gap. But there's lots of, well, I mean, I myself had, again, learning on this. I think I've given you some no good Mike Son stories. So another one I had on problem solving, I had an assembly plant, again, 1,000 people. We would make about 1,000 cars a day. An engine lifter went down one day, and an engine lifter would shut down my whole plant because we couldn't back it up manually. And so I run down there, and now again, I think I told you I worked at Toys R Us, and not very mechanical, but so thank goodness there's maintenance people were there, the engineers were there, and they were working on the engine lifter, and they got it back up and going. So I don't know if it took 5-10 minutes, whatever. And I thanked them. I tell people I even gave them a free Coke card or something, each of them. And my trainer said, "No good, Mike. Why no good? Should I give them a free lunch?" And so no. So again, I ask you, why is that no good? It's no good because they fixed the problem. But I didn't stop and ask them why. And that's what my trainer said. "Mike, son, please have them stay and facilitate them getting to root cause." So getting the engine lifter back up and running is not problem solving. So I can say every organization I go to, I can safely say that outside of Toyota, that is the definition of problem solving I see. and it's firefighting. And so obviously we have to do that. We have to get the engine lifter back up and running. But what is missing in most every organization is that coming back and getting to root cause and then putting in the countermeasure. So even that day, to finish that story, I took them over to the whiteboard and I started facilitating root cause. Now, I usually ask people there, now, do you understand? Now, I told you I went to human resources and I didn't know anything about human resources. I think I told you that the first session. And my trainer said, you don't need to know anything about human resources to go do plan, do, check, act in human resources. I hope you remember that story, because the point was I can lead human resources by doing plan, do, check, act, and teaching it, doing it and teaching it, like we said. I don't need to know anything about that engine lifter. I don't need to have any mechanical ability to help facilitate PDCA, root cause problem solving, with that engine lifter. I hope you all understand and agree to that. So anyway, I started that, but then my radio went off and somebody was calling me to another fire. Literally, I had another breakdown on the other side of the plant. So I started leaving and said, excuse me, you know, I was heading to the marker to somebody else, and my trainer said, no good, Mike, son, you stay. I'm like, no, I gotta go. No, you stay. I'm like, I was going, I wasn't listening to him, and he grabbed me by the shirt and said, please, Mike, son, stay. And then I'll never forget what he told me. Mike, son, solve one problem today. And boy, did that was that a game changer. Solve one problem today. Yep. Again, I've been in manufacturing. There's lots of problems, lots of fires. I can firefight all day long, walk out after 10, 12 hours and never have solved one of them. So the challenge for me and for you is to solve one problem. And then it was me going to my organization and on my Gemba walks and to my managers and my supervisors, and I would ask them, what problem are you solving today? In the midst of their running around like me, right? Fixing problems. I don't forget, I don't remember if I asked you or told you how many times a day the andon is pulled at Toyota. I don't know if we had that discussion or not. I'm gonna assume we didn't, and ask you quickly, or not ask you, but hypothetically, how many times a day you think the andon's pulled? I know we talked about the andon and what the operators pull to identify problems. Again, I'm going back to when the plant started and we had new suppliers in the US and all that, but we had 12,000 andon pulls a day. Now, I always, when a live group, I get people to guess and they say 10, 100. I say too low and they say 1,000, too low, and it's 12,000. So no shortage of problems. And I always ask, is that okay or no good? And sometimes people will say no good, and then they'll understand, oh, remember problem identification, 12,000 andons is good as far as the culture. It wasn't good as far as productivity. Remember, we have quality standards, and then they're pulling the andon. So the quality is to standard if people are pulling the andon. We're just not producing so many that day because of the line stops. But problems are being identified, so it's good. Now we gotta, again, we have to fix all those problems. But then if each team, right, each team leader, each supervisor picks one that they're going to solve that day, and like that last chart showed, that we're going to get to root cause, and we're going to then maintain it or sustain it through standard work and training. Now we're going to start reducing those andons. I called back for the book, you know, again, this was 30 whatever years ago when we were starting up. 17 years ago was the book. I called back and talked to the assembly manager. He said about 6,000 pulled. I'm going through the plant we went through last week with the group, and it's about half of that again. I'm thinking about, by my I didn't get the counter, but I knew from the culture about 2,500, 3,000 polls. So again, improvement, continuous improvement, problem solving. So again, if it's very important for you to distinguish between fixing the problem and solving them, whatever terminology you want to use. Another organization I went to, they said fix for good was the way they distinguished it. Another organization I went to, we did it was a longer than a Gimbal walk. We were there for a 3-day workshop, and we're going to talk about leader standard work here at the end. And so anyway, they went out to observe a leader because we just said our role as leaders is to problem solve and teach and coach. So leader standard work is saying, okay, how many hours a day we're going to do that? To be intentional, just like we said with the one problem. So anyway, they went out and asked the supervisor, how much time have you spent problem solving today? And it was about lunchtime. He said, I've been solving problems all morning. So 4 hours in his mind, he's been problem solving. He said, oh, tell us about it. Well, I had this part shortage. I had to run over to the other plant and get this part. Then I had this breakdown. I had to run over there. So it was firefighting. He was firefighting all morning long. When they asked him about root causes of any of them, guess what? 0. So that's what's happening in most organizations. And I can place a bet it's what's happening in yours. I would place a bet on it. So we have to stop that. You have to stop that. Just like literally the trainer had to grab me by the shirt to stop it, to stop the running around and taking the time to get to root cause. And I love that goal on one problem each day. So that organization, they changed their terminology from problem solving to root cause problem solving to make the point. So that's your daily problem solving. Again, I don't need an A3 now, because what I got on the slide now is a larger level problem solving. On that basic problem solving, I just need people to thinking way to think why. And it doesn't have to be 5, right? But that was the discipline that the Japanese taught us on asking why till you get to root cause. I think I gave you these examples. It was, happened 6 months ago, but those the ones I remember from Mexico. The printer ran out of ink, so they lost 25 minutes on a line putting hot dogs and things. So the stickers for the package ran out of ink. 25 minutes. I think I told you this story because I tell it all the time because it sticks in my head for 2 reasons. One is, again, they didn't get the root cause. They just fixed that. They put it back in, ink back in. Took 25 minutes. And then when I asked about it at the hour-by-hour chart, through the translator thing, I was quickly told then by the the CI person that we don't ask why of our people. That's not the role of the team leader. The role of the team leader is to keep the line running. So then we went back and again asked, remember on our people thing, like, do you want that to be the role of the team leader, to ask why and to solve problems? And they fortunately said yes. And now we're working on those systems with that company for their team leaders to, again, be part of standard work and develop it, and then to ask why, solve problems, and then to revise the standard work. So is it part of your role and responsibility of your operators and your leads to problem solve and to get to root cause and to make improvements? Again, and how many people in your organization does that involve? The other one was, and I wanted to get you this one because same company, we have a maintenance trainer helping out the company, and they put in a little 5 little just a little tool. It's not an A3, but they didn't want to intimidate with an A3. And again, we don't need an A3 for a basic problem, but they're trying to just like teach the thinking. So anyway, so a couple of weeks later, I go in and on my Gemba walk, and we saw I think it was the biggest downtime on their Pareto chart. And that's why I asked about it. And they said, oh, we blew the circuit board went bad on this food line. And I said, is there a problem solving? They pulled out the 5Y. It was in Spanish, so I needed a translator. Because usually, again, the problem is, the fuse blew, countermeasures replaced the fuse, right? And again, that's what's on your guys' boards if they're writing anything, those types of problem and solution, Band-Aid, short-term countermeasure. So anyway, I said, please read me this in English, and please don't tell me that the countermeasure is to change out the fuse. And the translator doesn't know anything about problem solving. She said, yep, that's the countermeasure, change out the fuse. I said, how did they get to that if they asked 5Y? Well, it was a circular 5Y. The panel got wet. So the wires got wet or whatever, the fuse blew. They asked 4 or 5 and then came back to the fuse blew, and so change out the fuse. So at that point I stopped, because the poor team leader who filled that out, it wasn't their problem. Whose problem was it now? Now it was the problem of the coach. Remember, our role as leaders is to do problem solving and coach and teach. So nobody, I hope that we didn't find out, and while like coach wasn't there and we got him and all that, but the point is, like, the poor team leader filled out the why, like he was told, but he wasn't coached on it. And then worse yet, he would put it into the form and nobody ever looked at it. And then we even got deeper. So this is the type of coaching and things that you got to do at your Gemba. That's why you have to be at the Gemba. That's why we finish leader standard work. Like, you're out there teaching and coaching. Because then when I started asking about how did the panel get wet, how did water get in the panel, then they told me, well, sanitation sprayed it. Sanitation's a different department than maintenance, so they can't. It's like, oh my gosh. So then we got silos. And now we got manager level problems, because we got communication not happening between maintenance and sanitation. So nobody was working on it, because if sanitation then was communicated, then we could coach them on how do they keep that panel from getting water in it. Again, then the teamwork with maintenance, because maintenance owned the panel, but sanitation was spraying it. So the point is, like, those are the problems that you're having. But nothing was being done on that, other than it was documented. We lost however many minutes on that. So that's the problem solving we got to have you do. That's that first level problem solving. And if that's done by all your people, all your leads, all your supervisors, then the real problems, the tough problems, will then escalate up. And then we can do an A3. So this is the A3. So Toya, I'm not going to go over this quickly. I'm going to go over it quickly. This is Toyota's A3 problem solving. Now, I will say that this isn't the A3 problem solving I had when I worked there. They found a problem in their problem solving. And what we did is, you can see, number 1 is define the problem or clarify the problem. Then we were taught when I was there, then to go to ask why.
I don't know if we're seeing the right slide. Are we still seeing the linking the 8 steps? That's what I'm seeing. Is it right?
Is that what you're seeing? Yeah. We're good. Because that's the 8 steps of Toyota. So I'm just making a point here, is that this is the A3 problem solving at Toyota, the 8-step problem solving. So I want to make sure we do the first level root cause first, then the repetitive cross-functional problems will escalate up for the managers to work on, and that's this problems. So what Toyota did, again, in the early 2000s, 15 years after I worked there, was to put in step 2 and step 3. So we used to clarify the problem, then we would go to step 4. And on a basic problem, that works. On a complicated, large, vague problem, that does not work. It's very difficult to get to root cause. So Toyota put in step 2 and 3, and you break down the problem in step 2. You ask why, you don't ask why, you ask when, where, who, what, and you start breaking it down so that you're more likely to get to root cause. So that's the point there. Again, I'm trying to make is that there's different levels of problem solving. That identify the problem, ask why. That's a good process for a basic problem. And then on a A3, more complicated problem, Toyota taught us to then break down the problem in step 2. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you another example from another food company there that did an A3. They had their worst scrap item for the last 10 years. We were teaching the 8th step. They broke it down. They found which piece of equipment it came from. I should say what line first, because they had, 7, 8, 9 lines. They found out which line. They broke it down to one piece of equipment. They broke it down to one step in the process of that piece of equipment. And then they found 2 root causes, 2 issues out of standard that when they both happened at the same time is when the problem occurred. And that's why it was difficult, because when they were happening one at a time, it wasn't an issue, but then they both happened at the same time is when they would have it. And they never got to that because they never broke it down to that specific piece of equipment, that specific part of it. 10 years, their biggest dollars, but they found it with the 8-step problem solving. So that's what it's meant to do. That's what it's designed to do. Now I'm going to finish the story there, and not in a good way. But for your leadership, remember we talked about your leadership behaviors? So they reported that out to the leaders. And you know what the manager of that plant said when he heard that story? He said, "Why has it taken you 10 years? It took you 10 years to figure that out?" So we would call that a no good behavior, not helping the culture of identifying and solving problems. So what should you say if your people come to you and say, "We had just used a new problem-solving process. We got to the root cause of our worst scrap item for the last 10 years. I hope you say thank you. I hope you say finally. I hope you say great. We're finding that we took the time to get to the root cause. Let's do it again. What's next?" So again, example of behaviors, individual behaviors. All right, plan, do, check, act. Employee involvement. So again, this is everybody and teaching them. We talk about team member development, team member participation. Are your employees involved in suggestions? Are they involved in improvements? Who owns the suggestion system? When I say that, I mean who implements it? We put an X on the box on the wall because a lot of companies will have somebody, now they'll do it electronically, and they'll go somewhere and some committee is saying okay or no good, and then sometimes the people get feedback, sometimes they don't. And if you put in a suggestion and you don't hear about it, are you going to put in another one? Probably not. So my key point here is that in the Toyota production system, the team member who comes up with the suggestion owns that suggestion and owns the countermeasure. Now, will they be able to do them all on their own? No, but that's where the coaching and teaching comes in, and the support in order to get them the help they need, or to teach them to do it themselves. So the operator owns that suggestion. And then as a servant leader, we can support them in implementing that suggestion. So we're developing them through the process. So Toyota, we used to give a suggestion two a month from every team member. 30 years later, my understanding is it's now one a month from every team member. And again, it's looking little things, 1 minute here, 1 penny here, suggestion system. So again, that's one of those system examples. So do you have a system, a suggestion system, a way for your people to improve the process, make ideas? The next system, again, so I know we're getting close on time here. The problem solving, like we said, that's the core of the Toyota production system. The tools are all meant to identify problems so that we can then problem solve at all 3 levels, like we said. So Toyota had what they called a floor management development system and an enterprise management development system, EMDS, FMDS. And I usually ask people, are you managers or are you leaders? People, I did it on the bus last week and they all raised their hands and said, we're leaders. I said, well, that's good, but we need to be both. So at Toyota, the M and the D stands for management development. So in other words, we were taught that we are managers. We have to manage things. And I'm talking about title, I'm talking about roles. We're managing the budget. We're managing process improvement. We're managing whatever, 5S. We're managing systems. So we are managers. And then we're leaders, right? We're developing our people. So what's the role of a leader? It's developing your people. So that's the D. And I always ask leaders, can you do both at the same time? Well, yes, we have to. And so the FMDS or the EMDS is the scoreboard, the huddle board. And I always tell people that, you can have problem-solving training, and it's a great place. What's wrong with problem-solving training? Well, what's wrong with it is if you go back to business as usual, and then you're firefighting, you put the problem-solving binder on the bookshelf. So we need a huddle, a daily management system. A lot of times you'll hear it. Again, Toyota called it the management, EMDS. Because if you have the scoreboards there, but you don't have problem solvers there, then you just stand around for 5, 10, 15 minutes and you talk about what happened. And that's most of the huddles that I go to. They say, well, again, we had 25 minutes on the printer running out of ink. We had an hour on the fuse blowing, on the one line because of the water. And that's what they talk about. So they got the scoreboard, they're in red, they got the number of minutes they down or the hours, and then they talk about the problem and they don't talk about, again, the root cause and the countermeasure. So you have to put the two together. So I tell people at Toyota, again, this is good for wrapping this up, like what are you going to do differently? The Japanese gave us standard work, a scoreboard, and problem solving. And so we develop our standard work with the current best practice, we do it, and then we check and we see whatever injuries we had or whatever defects we had or whatever downtime we had. Then we start our problem solving. Again, we see it from the scoreboard. Then we have our problem solving, and then we take that root cause learning and put it back we revise the standard work, train everybody, and then do it again. So that cycle is what the EMDS system is facilitating. So we got we're building the right team. We get the people in there with those roles and responsibilities I was talking about. Then we've got the business, managing the business. So we're getting our true north, our Hoshin, determining what's the priorities, how we're going to measure it. Then we're identifying our problem. Then we're building that problem-solving army. So that's the system. Again, simple but not easy. But unless you say what should be happening, it's hard for you to identify your gaps in your culture. So that's daily management. Again, we're going to link it to the Hoshin. I don't spend too much time on Hoshin because usually I don't have executives in these things. Hoshin Connery, like we said, is the true north. That's the strategic problem solving, 5-year, 10-year plan. And then again, setting that direction, setting those targets, those goals. And it's top down, bottom up. There's a lot of confusion there, but it is the role of the leaders to look out and forecast and say, hey, we need to be here in safety or here in quality. But then the Toyota's Hoshin Connery then comes back from the bottom up on the managers and supervisors building the process to achieve those needed. What changes, what improvements in the process to achieve those results that are needed. And again, then those scoreboards are then updated on the daily management system. So that's the full cycle, the full system. Now that S again at the end of that EMDS is system. So because I've been to organizations where the scoreboards are empty or their boards are blank or whatever, they say, well, we tried it, we stopped doing it, it wasn't working, people weren't doing it. And I always ask, like, what have you ever had a plan that works the first time? Like that's not reality. That's what plan, do, check, act is. How quickly can you identify that it's not working, and how quickly can you make an adjustment to get it working? So that's plan, do, check, act. So that means the scoreboard system, right? Like FMDS. So if it's not working or the huddles, then we're adjusting it to get it to work. We went to a plant last week that a Toyota leader now is running, and he went over the FMDS, EMDS, and he said, this is our sixth cycle in 4 years because it wasn't working. It wasn't achieving the behaviors we wanted. In fact, he showed that first they started with safety, quality, productivity, cost, and human resources, and it was too much for his team that wasn't used to this. Their biggest problem was quality. So they just said for the next 6 months, we're only going to look at quality on the scoreboard. And we're only going to identify those gaps and prioritize them. We're only going to then work on root cause problem solving for quality. And it helped to simplify it and focus his team. I'm telling you that example again for the S. Like that's what leaders do. So you're working on the systems, you're not working in the system. So are you stepping back and again saying what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do to adjust? Same thing with the suggestion system. If people aren't doing it or the quality isn't good, then what are we missing? What do we got to do to adjust? All right, so then this is not by accident that this is near the end slide. Standard work. This came up last week, and it came up in the other company I've given you examples on. So like I told you, we got to have the scoreboard and the problem solving to work together so that people every day are identifying problems, they're prioritizing them, and now they're being held accountable and coached on getting the root cause. But then the next problem, in my experience, it comes up, people saying, we don't have time. We've got so many problems, so many things, we don't have time to problem solve. And I tell people, if you don't have time to problem solve, that's a big problem. Right? So that would be one you want to work on solving. Remember, like solve one today. Well, we don't have time to solve one today. Well, nobody has time. Like we said, there's always those fires. So that's the discipline of taking the time. So standard work is meant to be, again, using our examples, we've got individual behavior and we've got systems to drive behavior. Standard work is a PDCA, and it can be done as a system. You know, if you're hearing that problem from more than a few supervisors, then I would do a standard work leader for supervisors. And I always start with supervisors because I tell people that's the hardest job I had at Toyota. There's the most pressure. the most stress. I'm there with the product. I'm there with the people, and then the managers. And so that was my toughest job. So I always like to work on systems that will support the supervisor. So standard work is a good grasp of what are your supervisors currently doing with their time? And you literally do it for a week and have them stack it up and find out, and you'll find out all the stuff they're doing that is non-value added, all the stuff you don't want them to be doing, running around chasing parts or whatever else, doing time. The one company I was at, they were doing time, over almost an hour a day. HR thought it was 5 or 10 minutes a day, but then they had early outs and they had lates and they had all kinds of stuff, and all the exceptions were taking the rest of the time. So they helped them. That's a system example. Had another company, they had all these meetings that they were going to, and the supervisors and managers getting pulled away from the floor and the problem solving. So they did a blackout. In fact, we did that at Toyota. This company, I think they did 2 hours after lunch every day. They blacked out, no meetings. Anybody in the plant, in the company, call any meeting between whatever it was, 12 and 1 or 1 and 3, whatever. At Toyota, we did Thursday afternoon. We had Thursday afternoon blackout. So I knew I could always count on Thursday afternoon to get to the Gemba, to do my problem solving, to do my coaching, because I no meetings. Just another example of a system countermeasure. Also, as a manager, when I was first promoted, I remember my coach teaching me, I was going to all these meetings and different things. And then he coached me like, well, you can delegate, you can develop your people, have your assistant manager go into this meeting, and then he'll be developed, and then you can have time at the Gemba. So that was that coaching, individual coaching for that, my individual behavior. So standard work for leaders is meant to be a pre-DCA to get them doing their role. It becomes a lot of times a checklist in a company, and that's not the intent, although it's a benefit. The intent is for you to be problem solving and teaching and coaching problem solving. Remember, we said that's the behaviors we want. So this is a system to drive those behaviors. Standard work for leaders. So that sums up where we're going. Again, I know I covered a lot of things. I know I gave you lots of examples of no goods that might have been ringing home for you back home. And I hope, again, I can give you some challenges to change some behaviors and to change some systems to impact people. If you change a behavior as a result of this discussion, then you'll have impacted one person. If you change your behavior and go back and coach your people, you will have impacted the behavior of 5, 6, 10 people. If you go back, change your behavior, coach your people, and then look at the systems for your team or your company and start adjusting those systems, then will have impacted a whole lot of more people. So I hope you do all three. And I hope, again, because if you don't, then this hasn't been value added. So it will only be value added if we can get you to change your behavior and then work on a system for your organization. So I wanted to leave a few minutes here for some last questions. The last slide was our first president. He said that lean leadership, you got to be on the floor. Again, that's where the time is. That's where the action's happening. That's where you'll see if those behaviors are happening. We were always taught to go and see, and again, check your systems to see if check the behaviors to see if the systems are working. And if not, adjust, ask why. Again, we're getting to the root cause, and then show respect. That's such a big one. Again, that's that servant leadership and going to the floor and asking, how can I help you, right? And how am I doing in helping you? So I hope your definition of lean has expanded. I hope your role is expanded through these conversations. And again, I hope I can challenge you to make some changes. So let's open it up for a couple of questions here, Sean, at the end.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. And I think great way to end. I mean, these 3 points resonate with me very strongly. I mean, the first one, I was go to the Gemba, Genchi Genbutsu. I always sort of profess that to companies. And I think the second 2 are also very important. I mean, asking why, I think acknowledging that you don't know everything and you need to actually work as a team, ask other people, and obviously showing the respect. So very, very strong statements. Yeah, thank you. There is a quick question, and it's a point you made earlier, and I also took a note of it, but someone just asked for a bit more clarity when you said, please explain clearly the difference between problem solving and fixing the problem. So I think you mentioned,
Yeah.
so
I'll do it quickly because that's a good one. So because you want to ask it at your huddle meeting, like today or tomorrow. The question a Japanese asked is, will that keep it from coming back? So I don't like action item lists because it's just actions. And normally those actions are countermeasures, band-aids and fixes. So fixing the problem again was getting that engine lifter back up and running. Solving it is keeping it from breaking down for that reason. So the question to ask there and again, that's showing respect too. When you go to the huddles and they'll have the action on there, ask them, will that keep it from happening again? That's what I ask, because I'm in these Gembas. I don't know these people and I want to show respect. I'm like, will that keep it from happening again? And just like that, replacing the fuse in the fuse box after it got wet. They fixed it, they replaced the fuse. But then we can ask, will that keep it from happening again? Well, obviously not once you ask that. So they got to do something with the spraying or the waterproofing or the method of the spraying of it. That will keep it from getting wet and keep it from blowing again. So that's the difference between fixing and solving. And that, I hope you get that out of this hour, because if you get that, it'll be very powerful.
And I mean, for me as well, what I've sort of appreciated from today's session, as well as the previous ones, is, I mean, I think a lot of what you covered is not rocket science, but it does highlight sort of the importance of having a system in place, and almost being methodical in terms of how you approach things. Continuous improvement type culture, always looking for excellence, and focusing on sort of almost the fundamentals. And I think, from the things I've read on Toyota and seen it obviously with the plant in South Africa, it's just doing, continuously focusing on being better, sticking to the fundamentals, and like I said, showing the respect, go look and see, asking questions, that comes through quite strongly.
Yeah, it really is. I like that, the fundamentals and the basics. And like you said, if we just did these 3, if we go a long way, right?
If anybody would like to raise their hand to ask a question, I always say that when there's no questions, either it means you've covered everything in detail and there's no question to ask, or maybe just,
or they could put in the chat their behavior change or the system they're going to go look at to do a PDCA on.
I'm just gonna so otherwise, unless there's anything else, I think we can look at closing the session shortly. I'm just trying to find my screen to share my last slide or 2.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Mark. And just from my side, so just in closing, I do trust and do believe that everybody found value and benefit in not only today's session, but in the series that has been held. Obviously, it's all recorded, so each of you can go back and watch it, or obviously, get your colleagues, your other people within your organization to obviously engage with the content. So obviously, in closing, once again, I'd like to thank our public sector funders, as well as our event, the people involved from the companies, and then obviously you yourself, Mark. So thank you very much to everybody that's involved in the sessions to make them a success. As I mentioned, I've released a poll just to get your input, and I just want to mention again that on the 12th of September, we'll be having a in-person event at TWIMS in KZN on sustainability reporting. There is a hand. I'm going to just give it. It's Rajesh Govindar.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear you?
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify something, Mike. We talk about the 4 Ps and we've got that triangular diagram you started off with the 4 sections in it. So when you talk about the 2 pillars, which you mentioned in your session 3, when we covered people, you spoke about continuous improvement and then respect for people being these 2 pillars. I just wanted some clarity as to where in that diagram did those 2 pillars specifically fit in?
That's a great question. Thank you. And I hope I explained that in that first thing. With these different models and these different diagrams are ways to help teach the system. And again, I lived the system for 13 years, and then writing the book, and I learned from Lean Enterprise Institute and Jeffrey Liker, on these different models to try to again show that it is a system and it's more than just a set of tools. And so the 4 Ps was that attempt to do that, and it's not so neat and clean. They all roll together, right? And I said, Toyota, I don't know if I gave that example. I went there, last week, and they've got a different little model now that they show, and it all corresponds. They show, the technical side and the managerial side and the philosophy side of the triangle, and then people development in the middle. So I lined up the 4 Ps to that model, and they line up nicely. So I don't want you to get hung up on the terminology and things, more on the concepts, the principles, and then the behaviors. So because CI and respect, at Toyota, that was on the Toyota way. So that was part of the true north. And that was what the leaders defined the culture as. That's the standard. We want people in continuous improvement and respecting each other. Those are the standard behaviors. And if they're not, remember we said if you set a standard, then you can identify the problem. If somebody's not doing it, you can say, no good, Mike, son. Not respectful, not CI. So it's the core of the P purpose, right?
Okay.
For the true north. But then it goes throughout all of them, right? So then we say when we hire people, we're hiring them based on demonstrating those 2 behaviors. And it's those, and we just ended with it, right? It's those 2 behaviors that we're wanting happening in our problem solving. So I would answer by saying that those behaviors go through all 4 of the Ps, but they're identified at the true north by your leaders, right?
Okay, so all right, I understand that. So let me just ask you then. I liked when you said that we hire people demonstrating on those 2 behaviors. So I'm trying to work on the culture in my department, and of course dovetail that with the culture of the overall business, so it's all one and the same thing.
Right.
And I put it as 2 pillars. The first one being in step with technology, because it's something that, right from the top in our business, it is a high priority. And the other pillar being self-governance. And this was something that I deliberately chose because I have a very small department. We, the administration, IT, HR department, and pretty much we hold one another accountable for the work to get done. And with one person not there, as much as you have backup plans, things really the wheels start to come off if you don't have people who hold themselves accountable. So, so I put those 2 as the pillars. Would that fit into, you've got the core of the P for purpose, the true north?
Yeah, I could talk a little longer on technology, but so I don't necessarily like the technology in there. Now I know technology is huge right now, but my point I'm making, organization, is like technology is not the point, right? CI is the point. So how can we use technology to improve the business? Because I got people coming, companies show me, well, we've implemented this technology, It's like, so what? Like, how did it help you improve the business? And again, how did it help you respect people? Because because the company last week showed me, hey, the first robots we put in was the hardest jobs for the people, right? So we've got the respect for people and we got the technology. And here's how to improve the business. So the point is not the technology. The point is how can we use technology to improve the business, the CI, and to respect the people. So that would be my thought on that one. I like the self-governance, and I like the ownership and accountability and responsibility and all that. That's good. The technology one, I would just check and make sure you get the right order of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Very good.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. I don't see any more hands. The last thing I'm going to say is, and it will be in the slides, if anybody's interested in some of the other services that we offer under either our accelerators program or our skills development program or our sustainability program, please feel free to make contact with us, and we can obviously engage with you on that regard. Otherwise, I think all that's left for me to do is to once again thank everybody for participating in today's session. Thank Mark. Mark has been great. I've really enjoyed this series. I'm actually, it's sort of there's a bit of a vacuum now going forward, but I think you made the point when we spoke earlier is obviously this is just the starting point. The companies obviously need to drive this going into the future, and I'm sure we can look at having maybe some follow-up sessions with you, going forward. But thank you very much. I've really appreciate this opportunity to engage with you. One of the leaders in sort of this sort of lean thinking, thought leadership at a global level, just to get your insights. And again, I think what's encouraging for me is that everything you've covered, I believe can be adopted within companies within South Africa. So there's nothing dysfunctional or different from us. It's obvious, it is possible and it can be achieved. So thank you very, very much. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day and week.
Thank you all.
Thank you.